Hello everyone. So my project was called Drip Down Education, How the Introduction of Outdoor Learning Experiences Affects Student Engagement. My name is Megan Pancoast, and I'm attending Millersville for the Assessment, Curriculum, and Teaching Master's with a program concentration in STEM education. I work in the Harrisburg School District teaching 5th and 6th grade students. And the pictures that you see on this, the one down here is just a picture of the front of my school. And these two pictures are when I took my 6th graders last year on a project learning day called the STAR program with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, which kind of gave me a lot of ideas for what I wanted to try and implement in my classes. So what I was hoping to learn was that providing real-world experiences would help students be more engaged in their learning. I attempted to solve the problem of student disengagement and avoidance of work, because we found that a lot of students were missing work and had a reluctance to complete it. So the reason I wanted to do this was to hope that through student engagement, it helped to improve content knowledge of the area that we were studying, and it also helped students find a passion in what they were learning, rather than doing just rote book work all the time. So my two research questions that I came up with were, what is the effect on student engagement when students are immersed in content through the lens of project-based learning and meaningful watershed education experiences? Meaningful watershed education experiences is something I learned about this summer with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation when I did a professional learning experience. And the second question was, what effect does the introduction of PBL have on student attendance and time spent in the classroom? So that would mean without bathroom breaks, without nurse office trips, without having to go get drinks from the water fountain, or any of the 1,001 things that kids tend to come up with to leave a classroom during instructional time. So, a little bit of the background. So a lot of the research that I ended up doing for this project was on place-based learning and project-based learning. Project-based learning because that is what I have been covering a lot in all of my classes. And in both place and project-based learning, my research studies tended to focus in more on motivation and engagement of the students in my classes. So, one of the things that I read about in this was about the use of a program called Model My Watershed, which I had been planning on having students use to help them kind of contextualize what rain amounts meant and permeability of surfaces in our specific area. So a lot of the background research kind of lent itself to the creation of my project in general. So for my research design, I had a bunch of different ideas of how I was going to collect data. I'm a huge fan of data collection, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it. One of the things that I planned to do was to take field notes. So that would have started with me taking them the first week and kind of getting a baseline of how many times students left the room each day and observing when in class students would leave the room. And then field notes in the study would be me marking off how many times students had left the room during that 2-week period and comparing them. Student journaling would have been done through a progress assessment tool, which is basically just a box that had a standard where the students had to connect the standard to what they were studying and reflect on how the standard made sense to what they were trying to do, and then providing a reflection on how their project reflected it in turn. And student engagement walkthrough checklist was something I found that was made by a teacher leadership organization that basically provided the essential elements for student engagement. And what I had planned to do was I was going to take the top portion of it about participation, 2 times a class for the 5 days each week. So there would be 10 observations per week per class, making it 40 observations for 1 week and 80 total, in which I would analyze and pare down the results to see how their engagement changed from the first week to the second 2 weeks of the project. And then the second portion, I was going to have the principal stop in once a day for each class and do just a quick 5x5 type walkthrough where they would go in and they would mark off the boxes. They would ask kids questions about engagement just to get another set of eyes on the project. And finally, attendance data would basically be how many times were students at school, how many times were they marked excused absences, how many were unexcused, and same with tardies, which you can see I collected baseline data from my school up until the point when we left for the stay-at-home order, which is in the center here. For my anticipated findings and outcomes, I kind of break this down into 4 separate areas that were based off of where I had planned to test, or where the data was to be collected. So for one, on the student engagement, my students are typically pretty engaged. If you read my research, I said that my students in my class are typically around a level 3 to 4 on the student engagement walkthrough checklist, but I anticipated that with a project where students were actively involved in communicating with one another and actually creating something that would better our school environment, I expected to see a higher level of engagement with students per all of the background research that I had done. Its effect on attendance, I actually thought would be minimal to no change, as my students are there almost every day. If you look at the other screen back here, they had 94% attendance from the beginning of the school year up until the point when we left school on March 14th. So I expected to see very, very, very small amounts of change. For the class time spent in the classroom, because of the higher levels of engagement and students interacting and planning and researching, I expected to see a positive change in that students would not leave the room as often. And finally, for the progress monitoring, with all the research that we did in the 7 strategies of assessment, I couldn't see anything but there being a positive change in having the students self-monitor what they were doing. So I kind of broke this. Sorry, I put that on the wrong page. So for me, my final thoughts on this. As a teacher, I felt like this project placed an emphasis on the importance of the process of creating this, because before I've always been very data-driven and very reflective. So the idea of actually purposely planning creates more meaningful data to be collected. And the idea of writing it down always has been a daunting task to me, but having it to be able to kind of cement our learning and to have a tangible product to hand to someone else is really important, that I didn't quite realize the importance of before this class. And finally, it reinforced the importance of meaningful reflection, because this whole paper, this whole process has been a reflection on our teaching experiences and how we hope to make ourselves better to provide a better learning environment for our students. And for my students and the community as a whole, I think that this project itself would provide great 21st century skills for the students: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. It'll create environmental advocates, which our world sorely needs, especially in Harrisburg, where we have a water system that combines with a sewer system and overflows when we have rainstorms. And also creates a community outreach portion where students will be able to go and explain to people around them what they learned from our project and what they can do possibly at their home level or even at the government level, to be able to go and explain to people what exactly they're learning about in school and how it can better the world. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. It's been an awesome class.